I am Jonathan Humphreys. Welcome to the Hokuso Conversation. Welcome to the Hokuso Conversation. This session is with Markus Feller. He is the head of innovation and transformation at SV Group. SV Group and SV Hotel were responsible for the rollout and success of Stay Cook, which Hokuso was involved in, and won the Swiss Innovation Awards for Hospitality and was runner-up in the Global Innovation Awards. Markus leads various initiatives in SV Group, transforming the business from one state to the future state organizations. Given the challenges facing hospitality today in terms of the need to reinvent themselves, where the rule book has literally been torn up and there is a need for leaders to think about how to change their mindsets, their teams and their organizations for the future. This in-depth discussion about what it takes to change an organization in the theme of agile, cultural change, creating cultural bubbles, looking for sponsors, how to interact stakeholders with their teams, all of these kind of aspects, and also some of the challenges that we face today with remote leading and remote culture building is critical if we are in any way able to find the type of organizations and innovations that we need for the future of our industry. So it's absolute pleasure that I have this opportunity to discuss with Markus Feller what it takes to be a leader of change today and for the future. Thank you very much for listening to the Hokuso Conversation.
Good morning, Jonathan.
It's a pleasure to have you here on the Hokuso Conversation.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
I think today we're going to have a fascinating conversation. If we consider what's going on in the industry, hospitality, but also many industries today, there's an absolute need for transformation. And what we're seeing with the hospitality industry specifically is a huge investment and shift towards innovation and also the use of technology as potential solutions in terms of driving the industry forward. And I thought it would be great for us to have a conversation because you've been here in your career many times in terms of looking at how companies can transform themselves from one state to another with various processes and technical solutions and innovative solutions. So I was wondering if maybe as a starting point for the audience, you'd like to just give a bit of an overview of some of the things that you've done with companies, taking them from one state to another. And then once you've kind of given an overview, we can go into some of those in more detail from a personal basis.
No, happy to do that, Jonathan. It's a very broad topic, and I think that's what I really like about it. There's sort of like two topics that really always trigger me, or I think what I really like. There's like one is basically working with an organization and actually creating the change together with the organization. And the other thing is basically working on user-centric products and features and then creating bottom line impact. I can give you maybe sort of like two of these, it's both like transformation. One is like transforming a company or parts of a company, and the other one is really doing something great basically for users, for customers. So maybe let's start with the sort of like organization bit. There I quickly have to go back to when I was at Swisscard, Swisscard, leading credit card company in Switzerland. And I was heading up agile transformation and delivery. So 200 people organized in 19 agile delivery teams. And our CEO, not the current one, but the former one, basically said 5 years ago, hey, Swisscard, we go agile. What then happened is basically...
What does that mean, Markus? Just for the audience, what does it mean? It's something that a lot of companies are saying today, let's go agile. For the audience who may not be so familiar with that expression, what does it mean?
Happy to do that. I think Agile is such a broad buzzword, and at the end of the day, what it's all about, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's being able to either react or be proactive of what is happening, I think, with your customers or with your market, that you can basically just adapt and innovate fast and quickly in a way that also you have strong self-autonomous teams who really can take decisions and who are basically moving your company along, in the right direction. So I think it's interesting that you asked that. If you want to take it very broad, there's two ways of looking at that, and I'll come back to the example on the organizational change. But very broadly, you can say one thing is about doing Agile. And interesting, doing Agile is just you use processes, you use frameworks. There's nothing bad about that. And when companies, in my experience, when they start saying, hey, we go Agile, they talk about doing Agile. What then happens, and that's exactly what happened to Swisscard. We basically say, hey, we want to do Agile. So, okay, we implement a framework. It doesn't really matter which framework it is. What you get, I think, and these are some really, really powerful elements of that, you get transparency. Because doing Agile, I think everything is transparent. People know what is happening, You don't have a project that runs for 8 or 9 months. It's green for 8 months. In the 9th month, it turns red. And then we have a delay of maybe another half a year. So I think what you get with actually implementing Agile processes, it becomes very, very transparent what is going on. Because you iterate in very short cycles. Just an example, we iterated at Swisscard, we had a 10-week cycle. And basically everything is on one board. Being it a physical board or a virtual board, it doesn't matter, But that's a huge plus of doing Agile is you get transparency very fast.
So that's just to kind of put this into context. So that's a very different approach from previous transformation projects, which were long time in planning, long time in discussion, long time in sign off, and then a long time in implementation. Whereas now Agile it's a movement through the organization with essentially very fast feedback loops that allow the organization to keep changing. So everybody or certain teams are involved with, and you're going to go into this, I'm sure, certain teams are involved in kind of driving this change and figuring it back and creating the cultural change. But it's essentially live rather than waiting for it to go live over a long period of time and then trying to implement. Is that the right way of kind of thinking about it?
It's a nice summary. Maybe just putting this more into context and make it real. Yeah. I think when I talk about the board and it's very transparent, going back to Swisscard, we basically had one delivery engine. That means these Agile teams, that delivered all our changes, being it a compliance change, being it a new feature. And beforehand, we just had like project managers. They had their plans, Yes, we had a portfolio, but we looked at the portfolio each and every month. You had these like normal status updates, green, red, orange. But this is different now. You basically iterate 10 weeks cycle, and that can be also 8 weeks, doesn't really matter. But what you do, which is very powerful, at the beginning of that cycle, when you actually decide we're going to go into the next sort of cycle, we took our 200 people for 2 days in one room. Beforehand, we actually negotiated together with the executives, what are the priorities? So it's not like executive A has a different priority, executive B has a different priority. So we aligned with the executives, what should the company now focus on in the next 10 weeks? Not 6 months, not 8 months. And then you actually took that, and this, you don't get there just from today to tomorrow. I think it takes a bit of time to actually align on one set of priorities that helps the company, not one department, but what do we need to work on to actually achieve our strategic goals. So what you then do is basically with that aligned set of priorities, you actually take the teams who actually do the work, take them for 2 days in one room. And after 2 days, you have a full commitment of all the teams for the next 10 weeks. If you have not experienced that, it is very powerful, because at the end of the day, and that one, because it's really fascinating when you actually seen it, at the end of the 2 days, we bring in the executives again. So the executives and the teams basically commit to that. And this is very, very powerful. It goes actually with the transparency, because then it is clear. It is clear on a week basis what will happen. And you meet up then throughout these 10 weeks, you meet up on a weekly basis in front of that board, and you actually see how things are moving, you know. And yes, there are dependencies between these items, but it's actually very, very clear on what is happening.
I'd like to explore that, if I may.
Sure.
So Markus, you were just explaining about having these 200 people in one room for a couple of days, then bringing in all the senior executives and essentially getting everyone to kind of buy in and agree to the priorities and the way forward. And I see this as a great example of stakeholder management where everyone's on board from the very beginning. So I have a couple of questions for this. One is, how do you choose the people to join these agile teams? What kind of people are you looking for? Because obviously it's not the whole organization. These people are representative of, I presume, the future kind of organization that you are looking for in terms of certain attributes and mindsets and skills. So I'm curious, I'd like to explore that. And the second is around the stakeholders themselves, or the senior executives. How do you choose which kind of executives to get involved to make sure that the process is fully sponsored and has the highest chance of success?
Good questions. Now, maybe first on the teams, you know, and I need to clarify this here because, again, when you talk about cross-functional teams, agile teams, it varies according to company. And what we did is, not only now at Swisscard, but we do it now as well as at SV, these were delivery teams, you know. And when I talk delivery teams, it's a mixture of skills you had in there. I think what you aim for is basically that you can deliver A to Z. So basically you can shape the idea. So you need actually product management, classical product management skills, marketing skills. But then you can actually also, most in my industries, you know, even now in hospitality industry, I'm fairly new to that. There's so much about technology. So there's very few things that you can actually do without using technology, or that technology then helps you as an enabler. So what you put into these teams, apart from the business resources, let's call them like this, you put tech resource in there. But they work in a team, in the same team, and they are focused on one business value. It's not like just a project, oh, cool, let's just implement this new feature, and then I think you assemble, that's the old word, you assemble a project team, and then this project team runs for 6 months, and then I think you disassemble it, and then you do the next thing, you know. What you do with, and how I build cross-functional teams is in a way, and I get to the skills, and these are really coming from different disciplines, and they have the time. I'm not talking about 10% here or 20% here. That's also where things fall apart. You give these teams and these individuals time to work on these initiatives. And if I talk time, the key resources are fully dedicated to these teams.
Interesting.
And then it's A to Z. And yes, at the beginning it was not A to Z, but when I talk A to Z, you shape the idea and you implement the idea. And then also when the idea is implemented, when the solution is implemented, give you an example of an app, a real example. Classical situation. The cool guys in the company, the marketing guys, they actually, with some tech support, maybe even external, they implemented an app. And at one point they came to IT. Now we have issues. Now you need to look after that. That's the old world. In the new world, it doesn't exist anymore. Because you, as a product owner of that team, you look after your product. You look after the cool stuff, which is now new on the horizon, but you also look after the issues that arise when basically there are issues. So again, you know, doing Agile helps you to create ownership, because especially when you build the teams in the right way, if you build them product-centric, or basically they focus on a value that the company wants to achieve, they will do everything. And I can tell you, I've experienced that. That was step 2 with the Agile transformation that I was started talking about at Swisscard. Step 1 was different. I will talk about that in a minute. And that's where we failed, but we've learned. So apart from the transparency I was talking about, that each and every one, even the call center agent, can walk in front of that board and see what is happening. The second bit you get, because you assemble these teams in a cross-functional way, you actually bring these people together. they work in the same space. Yes, now it's virtual, doesn't matter, but I think at Swisscard we brought them all together so that we had basically 2 agile delivery floors, and we assembled the teams. Also, we knew there were dependencies between the teams, but we put the teams that had most dependencies to each other close to each other. And this really, really helps because it's all about fast decisions. So I think that the second bit I want to highlight about doing Agile, which is just step number 1, helps you really to create transparency. And it helps you when you build the teams right to create ownership. And it's not that sort of like putting something, I don't know if in English if it's correct, putting something over or throwing something over the fence, because there is no fence. There's also no discussion anymore about, business and IT. It's together. Together we work on a product and that actually pays to our strategy, and we do the cool stuff, but we also solve the issues. So I think that's sort of the second bit when you talk about teams, which is important now, the skills. This is really essential because it changes, I think before he had a project manager, maybe he saw his team in a weekly, and then he has a status report, and once he sees a sponsor, this is different because you work in a team very close together on a day in and day out basis. Even the teams, they do dailies every morning, 20 minutes. Everyone just tells what are my issues? Can someone help me? So when I talk about skills now, what is really needed, you need people who are not afraid of basically telling that they can't do something. So they open up, they say, hey, I actually need help. And I think about people who basically think more than just, this is now my role. No, we are a team. And yes, I don't expect the marketing guy all of a sudden to code. No, but maybe I expect the marketing guy to test. Or vice versa. Maybe I expect the developer to test. Or maybe even helping the developer to build the test cases with the marketing guy. So it brings these people much, much closer together. And I think you need a different mindset. And mindset, again, it's such a broad term, People not just only fulfill their role. So they think, how can I help and how can I contribute to the team that we actually achieve our goal?
This is for many people within an organization, when there is a switch to this new way, which is more agile, it's more adaptable, it's more flexible, the selection of the members to go into this team, and we're talking about mindset, we're talking about culture change here. What kind of mindset, and I know it's a broad topic, but what kind of, let's say, beyond the experience and the expertise, what kind of attributes are you looking for? You've mentioned, obviously, collaboration seems to be absolutely key. Teamwork seems to be absolutely key. But what other things are you looking for? And maybe another way of looking at this, when you've put these teams together, what kind of attributes have not worked? And you've had to say, look, I'm really sorry, this isn't working. We're going to have to change people around, and we're going to have to move people out of this agile team and put new people in. So just to kind of give some context for what kind of mindset. The reason I'm asking is because, going back to where we are with the industry today, the acceleration of change is going to be unprecedented in the next few years. The need for companies to be extremely agile across the hospitality space, but all other spaces that haven't yet adopted this philosophy is going to be absolutely critical. So I can easily see, having, been in organizations which are much more command and control historically, with organizational structures which were based on the old way of working, and are trying to move into this new, they're going to leave people behind. So I'm just curious, because I'm sure you've seen this happen where you thought certain individuals would work out and they haven't. So what makes a successful individual as part of this agile movement versus a not successful person?
Maybe just to be very clear on that, we didn't have a catalog. You can Google it. You find that what makes an agile person tick and what you need to look for. And then you can have your checklist, and then you actually take your people and then you rate them. We didn't do it like this. We started with what we had in mind. And I can share this, what I've seen, what worked and what didn't work. And if I say it didn't work, this is not a bad thing, but some people are more used to that and they feel comfortable in that situation. And others are not. And I tell you, there's space for both. There's really space for both. Maybe not if you're in a Silicon Valley, fast growing startup, but if in a traditional corporation, there's always space for both. So now what is really essential to me is, I tapped on it a bit, you need people who are not afraid of basically being transparent. Transparent, what is happening with their work. Again, it sounds so bold, it sounds so easy, but I tell you, this is not, and this is my experience, if a developer needs to share on a daily basis, where is he with his code? A tester shares. Even a business person, and I've sometimes experienced that, on the business side, yeah, we do that. The campaign strategy is coming. The marketing plan is there. Where is it? I think tech was ready, but anyway. So I think one element of this is being not afraid of sharing where you are, being not afraid of basically asking for help. And then I think that there comes the sort of like, and basically being almost like sometimes vulnerable to actually open up.
Can we explore this a bit? Because I guess it's also saying, I don't know, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
And it's kind of, if you think about organizations historically, the development of expertise within organizations, knowledge is power, all of these kind of things, knowledge is influence, knowledge is actually the opportunity to get promoted. Whereas, the new way of doing things, and has been for successful organizations for many years now, is essentially the dissemination of knowledge. And what you're talking about is this opportunity to basically, as soon as you learn something that's going to help the team, you share it fast.
Yes.
Right. And you continuously evolve. So I just wondered if you could talk about that, the openness you've talked about, the vulnerability, but also the strength in saying no and being supported for saying no, because it's in some organizations today, you could still be penalized for saying, I don't know.
I know. No, I think maybe just one element of basically just being able to being open, being vulnerable, and basically knowing that the team will not judge me for that. The team will not judge me for that. And then I think the second bit is I want people who want to learn. People want to learn. They don't want to come in at 9, leave at 5, and they feel very comfortable if they basically do a very repetitive job. And there's still jobs out there, and that's fine, But these type of people are very much sort of looking for everything needs to be clear. It's like that VUCA world. Everything needs to be clear. I need a lot of security that I know when I come in the morning, I know what is happening, more or less the whole day. This is not how it works in such a team, because stuff comes up. Or all of a sudden, a new opportunity appears. Yes, and then I think also doing Agile has some very powerful items. And it happened to me, a partner, innovation happens when it happens. When basically a partner has a new idea, they share with us or we share with a partner, and then it's there. And what you can do in that respect, you actually bring these teams together. You understand very quickly what needs to be done where. You collectively change the priorities that you previously have set with the executives, and then it's all good again. But this happens. This happens in a small space. This happens even in a bigger space. And people who need a lot of security, who really want to know what is going on each and every day, who maybe are a bit, how should I say this, just don't really feel comfortable sharing. I think that's not really the space. And I think for me, the biggest one is really learning, being curious. I've seen people moving, I tell you, from the business side to the tech side because they were so close, not like deep coding, but also they understood what that code means. And they did even simple coding and vice versa. I've seen basically dev guys, developers moving to testers. This is a natural move, but even moving into business analysis. And I don't need a formal development program for that. I think some corporates, they have these great, now you're here, you need to do it for the next step. You need to go there and there. But I've seen numerous examples because you had these people so close together. People got interested. Okay, let's show me, the business analyst, show me how this looks in the system. I think this is cool, and then they developed. So also that development thing is very good. Skills-wise, I think communication obviously is key, but that was key in waterfall or agile. I think for me, it's really that it's a faster pace. Even if I go back to these 2 days where you figure out what can you do in the next 10 weeks, this is really a fast-paced environment. And then just maybe one last example, just that I illustrate a bit what it means to become vulnerable. There's a ceremony. And again, doing Agile helps with that. After the 2 days, everyone is in the room. The executives are in the room. Then there's a vote. Who doesn't feel comfortable with the plan that has been produced over the 2 weeks? And people who basically do not feel comfortable need to raise their hand. So you're in a room of 200 people. It takes some guts to raise your hand, because you listen. Teams will present where they have issues, where they have challenges. And then you ask the people, hey, now, first you ask the teams, but also then the individuals. So it takes some guts to stick up your hand and then not being judged for that. And there's so much when people talk about mindset, when they talk about behavior change. This is all what it is, And it's interesting. Google has done, I don't know when they did this study, but they looked at what are the key success factors for a high-performing team. Guess what? 2 terms came up: vulnerability, security.
Incredible.
So if people are able to open up, if they can show vulnerability, and yes, it takes a bit time, and if they can be secure that they will not be judged by that, but their input will be taken for real, then that's what creates high-performing team. It's not something, I came up with. I had the chance to work with very great people who really know about that stuff, but I've experienced it. I've listened to them, and I've seen it in practice. And this is really sort of call it the secret sauce, or basically what really makes that team tick.
I think it's fantastic. I think it's obviously a difficult balance to achieve, but I can imagine once it's been achieved and you're able to keep the momentum on that approach, it's very constructive in terms of the dialogue and the environment and the learning that can happen. I have from a leadership perspective, the role of the leader and yourself, because I think you're perfectly placed to answer this question. As your role as a leader, looking after these agile teams, how are you able to create this kind of environment, one? And what is your role in terms of managing the stakeholders as well as the teams? Because surely this vulnerability and security, the ability to open up, shouldn't just be the teams. It should also be the stakeholders, the senior executives, that they also feel that they can also express and give voice to what's going on, so that there is a dynamic that creates this pace within the organization. So I'm just curious, because you've done this many times as a leader, so how you manage to do it. And I guess the other aspect is, what have you learned from doing it as well?
Many people ask me that, how do you do it? And for me, there's a very simple answer, and then I can give you a bit more sort of the longer one that is not just coming from me, but also again from people that I've exchanged with, and the dots then actually came together for me. I think for me, what is absolutely crucial to get buy-in, it doesn't really matter being in the teams, being in the executives, people just will work with you and want to work with you if they actually see you work with them. What do I mean by that? I had the title of Head Agile Transformation Delivery. Sounds cool, but at the same time, and I think what definitely helps, but this common sense, I think you just need to be in regular exchange. You need to be open. People know, again, they can come to you with a problem and you don't judge them. But then I think when they come to you, you don't just basically tell them, oh, don't bring me the problem, bring me the solution. You listen to them and you help them. And by helping them, I can give you some examples. I'm a practical guy, Helping them can mean you negotiate a contract with them, or you sort out some contract issues with some, providers that you have. Or maybe they have an issue with some legal guys, internal legal guys, they playing, maybe not difficult, but maybe that's sort of the practical explanation. What I've seen is how we create trust. That's another big topic. When start people trust you? And my experience, it starts with basically if people realize, hey, Markus is not just like this guy, senior management, and he just wants to show a nice picture to the executives. When they see that actually I'm on the ground and that he listens. And listening again is, and I can tell you, I have 4 girls and a wife, so I basically know what listening means. But there's a very, very good exercise you can do. It's called lazy listening. And again, it's not from me. Great
talk. Tell me about this, Markus. What is it?
So it's basically, I can share the name. It's Michael Sahota. I think for me, that's the guy at the moment. He talks about Agile, but it's not Agile. He talks about yourself and what you need to do as a leader to actually show up as a leader and to actually steer and help transformations. Anyway, so now to back to the lazy listening, and I think that's where it starts. There's an exercise you need to try out. Pick someone, maybe someone that you know, and basically they tell you a story. And you just look them in the eye, and you're not thinking about the response you're going to give. You just listen. You just listen to them, and I tell you, it's damn hard. And we did this, and I tell you, we did this for 2 minutes. It's damn hard. And yes, it's not always 2 minutes. But what I mean is, going back to sort of what a practical thing, if you're not on the ground with the people, and the same thing you need to do on the executive level, I think it expands across the thing, you need to listen to the people. And by listening, not just only listening, not putting your views onto them, but hearing them. And then I think I think you listened and they think it's great. Okay, Markus came and actually walks the talk. People only start believing things when it happens. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, Markus, we have really that challenge there, we would like to deliver, but we can't with the current resource. Can you help us out to have that discussion with the provider? Okay, fine. Oh, great. He actually listened. But the next step is making it happen. So then, and again, very practical. You actually take that person, ideally you take them along because maybe they can learn, they're part of it. So then you actually set up a little call with that provider, you discuss it, and then it happens. That's what really matters. And that's when people ask me, Markus, but how do you do it? And interesting enough, I tell you, for 16.5 years, I was at Swisscard, financial services provider. I quit, and then I moved over to hospitality, total different industry, total different culture. And people say, are you crazy? And I sometimes ask myself, can I actually do the same thing, transformation-wise, in a new place, total new industry, total new culture? And people told me, Markus, if you're somewhere else for 16.5 years, you know everyone. You know exactly which button you need to press. And I asked that question myself when it was December, I think, last year. I thought, in Jan, I'm going to start there. Will I be able to do this? I was able to do it much faster because I've learned so much. And what are really the important things that at the end of the day, it's all people. If you want to a bit more, put this into context,
Okay, I'd like to explore this a little bit more, if I may, because I like this area a lot. It is all about people. How and when did you get to this point that you realized that this is one of the key success factors of leadership? Were you always like this? Or did you reach a point in your career where you said, I need to figure out a new way of doing things? And you figured out that way. And how did you figure out that way? Who helped you? Because there's probably, I'm sure there's lots of people listening to this and they're going, this sounds great. I'd love to engage more with my teams. I'd love to be more effective. I'd love to be more open. I'd love to be, more motivating. I'd love to be there for them in a better way than I can be at the moment. So they want to do it, right? But they don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious, did you reach that point, or is this something that's always come naturally to you?
Certain elements, yes. Certain elements, no. I think I was always a guy who, when I headed up project management or process engineering, that was, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. What I always tried to do is really be there for the people. Because I had people, and I was never afraid of actually having strong people in my team. People, they knew much more than I did in their subject matter area. And I always tried the discussions I had with them, especially also the guys who were a bit more senior, it was all about creating the environment that they can actually work in. It's about how do you manage stakeholders? What can I do? How can I help you? Now you call it servant leadership. I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, no one talked about that. But it's stock standard. You sit down with people, you actually have time for that. And it's not easy because you have a lot of stuff on your plate as well, but take time. So I always did that. I try to stay close to people. I always actually ask people to give me feedback. I'm a guy who actually gives feedback on a regular basis, being it positive or it just needs to be constructive. And it's also, you need to ask yourself in your career, how many times did you get feedback which was constructive, but maybe it was directed to you that you actually need to change something? My experience, again, I got that feedback from people where I established trust, and that really helped me, So I think I had that sort of, since I started, maybe not at Deloitte, I think, but then I think at least throughout my career at Swisscard, where I had really different teams, different constellation of teams, that was there. What has really changed, and where I actually realized that I was already doing some stuff and other stuff I wasn't doing at all. That was when I took over the whole Agile transformation and delivery. That was about, I think 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And what I did back then, I was cognizant that back then, yes, I understood a bit how doing Agile, what that really means, all these different roles and everything. But then I told my boss, and also I have also a good network, people who I trust and people who I know who know more about that thing, I said, hey, look, I want to do coaching or a training, not about methodology. That's doing Agile. For that, I have tons of people. I have Scrum Masters. I have product owners. They know that stuff. I don't need to know that. I need to know the broad elements of that and how this thing hangs together. But what I said, I want to learn about more Agile leadership and what Agile leadership is really all about. So what I did, I went to my network, not 50 people. I wrote to 3 or 4 guys that I know who are in that space. Guys, I'm basically taking over that new role. I want to do something really about leadership. I didn't even call it Agile. I want to do leadership sort of in that new way. And I got immediate feedback. And don't want to promote this, but I think he's a great guy. I got basically pointed in the direction of Michael Sahota. This guy is a Canadian guy. He actually does coaching, runs these sessions. And they really recommended him to me. Because it's, I think what Michael says, put Agile off the table. Put Agile off. That's his first word when you first meet him. What it is about, and I think that's really interesting. But that really opened up my eyes, and I was able to connect the dots. It's all about yourself, not about the others. It's about yourself. And you ask me, how did I manage? It's all how you appear. And he even said,
"Can you explain that a little bit more?"
Yes, I will.
Yeah,
I will. There's a cool thing that really sticks. It also stuck to me. He basically said, look, you cannot change people. You just can change yourself. And I thought long and hard about that. I said, yeah, but it's going to take me 100 years then to do transformation. He said, look, it's and that has another aspect of it. But basically, it's so true. And then I think he put something up which is really powerful. He put up a red list and a green list. Happy to share that then, also with the audience, because it's so powerful. It's basically on that.
Please do, Markus.
Yes, on that you have adjectives. And red basically doesn't really foster a good environment. And it's something how you appear and how you do things. I'll give you an example like push, convince. And then there's the green list. On the green list you have listen, co-create. So very easy. I think 5 adjectives on each side. And that for me, that was really, that hit me, and say, hey, what I'm really trying to do now with the great thing about my job is I don't need to wait until I have a chance to play with that or to actually see if it works. I can do this every hour, every 30 minutes. So I'm just much more conscious, when you say what has changed, I'm much more conscious about these things, and it's not a spiritual thing, not at all, but it's just being much more conscious what I do, how I appear. And yes, I fail, because I know sometimes you get in a situation, it gets heated, and then you just, hey, I have no more time. I don't know, just let's get that stuff done, just do it. Why the hell? and then I think what is really important, these 2 things, listen, happy to really share it with the audience.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
It helps to reflect how many people, especially also on senior management level, do reflect, or do they just follow their agenda?
Interesting.
So
Just on that, I'm very well aware of that myself. I also have that tendency, but I'm trying more and more to do fast reflection, right? And so I then look at a way of recovering from that. Let's call it not so constructive way of doing something.
and then I think
Right.
Jonathan, what is really more powerful, if you had such a moment, if you had a red moment,
Yeah.
things fell apart. How many people have you seen, people who have screwed up? And I'm not saying that they delivered a wrong feature, but they actually damaged a relationship because they actually were abusive, or not abusive, but basically aggressive. I tell you what happens in personal experience. I've done that, you go back to the person. And it's also stocks. You tell them, hey, look, I'm sorry. It shouldn't have gone that way. Doesn't mean that you need to change your opinion. And it's hugely powerful. It's hugely powerful. And so I think that's when you ask me, what has changed? I think some of the ingredients, I think I have that in me because I just care about people. And it's not, I don't know, some hocus pocus stuff. No, I care about people. I like to work with people, and I like to see people progress. And I've done it many times, being in individuals, being in teams, being in executives. That's what I just love. That's why I care. And then I think, but really that session, I think it was not a 6 months coaching thing, it was like a 3 days event or 2 days event, and then another 3 days later, really started putting stuff together for me. And I think that was for me sort of one of the deciding moments when I started really listening, really listening. I think I always knew that in order to get trust and that people start believing in you, you need to make things happen. And I'm also a practical guy, I'm not afraid of getting my hands dirty and negotiate a contract or maybe even writing a process or whatever it takes. You cannot always do everything. Yeah. And then I think what happens, people mirror.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but people mirror. And it's interesting, and then also then hearing this back, just another example. When I left Swisscard, this was a great place. Then we had our, like farewell ceremony. And there were like about, 150 people in the room. And my boss was a very creative guy, CTO. And then he didn't do the normal speech. He basically said, blah, blah, blah. And then he paused and says, guys, now I'm not going to talk about Markus. What do you think about Markus? In the room.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So, and what the feedback I got back from people who had never expected it, a guy working in infrastructure development. I'm not a tech guy. This guy said, when I needed Markus was always there. I only had, 3-4 interactions with that guy. Or another comment was, I was an executive. If Markus says something, it happens. It doesn't always happen in the way that I expected, but it happens. Maybe it comes a feedback back, say, hey, we cannot do this. We need to go other way. So just to get such a broad, also but it basically showed me that something must go right, And again, I think I applied. Maybe that's why also at SV, and I also get that feedback there, That's why I learned a lot in these 16.5 years in financial services. But why then? I have a question mark. Can I do the same thing in a totally different industries than culture? Yes, I can, and I was able to do it much faster.
Yeah.
So
I have a question on this. It sounds great, and I think it is, when it happens, it's very rewarding, both for, and I do try. It's rewarding for the team. The individuals. It's also rewarding for myself because you can see, the process and the improvement of the situation. But time. So I always, and I'm speaking personally about this, it takes more time. Maybe in the short term, it takes more time. But, I was speaking to a CEO yesterday and he was saying I didn't finish until 11 p.m. and he called me at 7:30 this morning. With people's agendas and responsibilities so stacked, sometimes it feels so much easier and quicker to just say, look, let's just get this done and let's just get that done and let's just get this done. How do you manage this from a time perspective? Because it feels like sometimes it takes more time to get to that deeper level of understanding, to listen, to you make sure that you have the right kind of follow-up, etc. So how do you program this into your lifestyle and your day in a way that doesn't mean that you're working, such crazy hours you don't have time for your 4, I'm sure, beautiful daughters and your wife? So how do you manage this?
It's hard, and it doesn't always work. I had situations where people came to me and say, "Hey, Markus, I haven't seen you in 2 months, like a Scrum Master, and you know that we have issues there." I said, "Yeah." So it's hard, but I think what you learn, and this is again a broader topic, it's prioritization. And it starts again something that doing Agile, and we have not even explored the being Agile bit, which was actually much more interesting. Anyway, but on the doing Agile side, it's all about prioritization. As a company, it doesn't help you to try to do 100 things at the same time. And I know that's a really difficult discussion with executives. Really difficult discussion, but I tell you, over time, also at Swisscard, we managed to boil it down to a set of priorities, and the teams told us how much they can do. So you can think about this as a list with numbers, number 1 and going down to number 200 with features, basically product ideas or services. And basically we decided with the team how far down we can go the list, not the executives. Yes, we got input from them. And it goes back to myself, I think, how do you prioritize yourself? And sometimes I'm awful at that because I'm a curious guy. And how often did I now reschedule that podcast? So, and I tell you,
we finally got here. So
I know, but it's because it's hard. It's really hard, especially for people. I can just tell for myself because I'm interested. I'm always like, there's another cool startup, or there's a great guy like Jonathan or someone else, and you talk to them and you want to develop something. Then to really factor in time to spend with the people and to listen to people, not only talking about, oh, now what is that? Like content discussions. Reserve time for personal discussions. And I think what I've learned, this is also something, I think it's intuition. I think you learn over time, because when you learn a bit over time, or you pick up, if you listen, but if you pick up on these things quicker, that's just for me, as I grow older or with more experience, I pick up on these things quicker.
Yeah.
And then I think when a bit, because you've seen it. And again, it doesn't really matter if it's Swisscard or SV. It's just about people again, and you know how things actually hang together. And well, maybe probably should have a chat with someone. And I think it's a lot about intuition. And again, but it's tough. You need to just prioritize your things and maybe reserve, even if you do one-on-ones, think about how much time in one-on-ones you spend. And it's not fluffy stuff, well, it also depends about the persons, how much persons want to open up, the different ways, or how vulnerable I think they are, or how you are to them. There's no formula for that, but allow a slot for that. And sometimes maybe you need it, especially if people know about that. It's not about you sharing with them, it's they sharing with you. And it just takes time. And with some people, you do this more often. And I tell you, with the guys who have built a lot of trust, where I also knew I can be totally vulnerable, in a one-on-one of an hour, we discussed probably 5% content. And all the other stuff was like stakeholder, how can we do this here? Can we do that there? Much more about that. So what I'm trying to do is just to reserve time for that, and not only just ask them, oh, how are you? And that's a good one as well. If people, they pass you in the floor, you need to do this once. I do this sometimes. They ask you, how are you? And then what they expect back is, oh, no, everything is fine. Tell them, oh, nothing is good. It's all bad. Look at their reaction. People
don't know what to do with that, actually.
But then I think, yes, it's a courtesy, yes, I think, but then you can just say hello. Yeah. But if you don't accept any answer as an answer, then you should not even ask.
But then it goes back to the openness again, right? It's the ability to say these things and not be judged, which goes back to the beginning of what you were saying. It's interesting. I think we've talked a lot since we've launched the Resilience series as well about intuition, the fact that today the rule book's been ripped up and that leaders have really kind of had to go back to their core. And the leaders that were highly intuitive during this crisis have generally fared pretty well because they've had an instinct and they've been much more in touch with their teams and their customers and their clients. And interestingly, for me, it's also sometimes it's the absence of communication which triggers my intuition. So if I don't hear from somebody, that's when the alarm bells go. Maybe I haven't had that opportunity to even sit down with them to even understand, but it's like, I haven't had a call from that person for a while. So I know it's key. So I think the absence of communication can be as powerful as the communication itself.
Well, maybe Jonathan on that one, I think we talked a lot about I gave you concrete examples of doing Agile, and doing Agile is good. I think what most companies do, they stop there. Yeah. They implement the processes. They have the transparency. It's all great. But what we have talked about a lot about vulnerability, security, that goes into the space of being Agile. Yeah. And I think when you look at with doing Agile, just by doing Agile, and the worst thing, this is exactly what happened at Swisscard. We just said, we're going to go Agile. What did we do? We were doing Agile. We implemented the framework. We implemented processes that gave us structure, that gave us transparency, that brought the teams together. All great. But we did not much on the doing Agile thing. Just what we were talking. That's more sort of the fluffy stuff, the interpersonal thing. If people sometimes say, it's user-centricity, but yeah. And I think what is really, really interesting, if you want to build high-performing teams, then doing Agile is not enough. I've seen numerous companies. They said, no, but we've implemented a framework. And yes, we have transparency. We have all these boards. It looks great. But why is nothing else moving, Why do people not take more ownership? Why does it still take the same ways so long to build a feature? This is exactly what happened in the first step of Swisscard doing the transformation journey. Then we turned it around. We worked much more on the being Agile side and did a lot of stuff just with ownership, executives, buying. It's a different world. It's not picture perfect. No, not at all. But I've seen it, I've experienced it, and it was tough. But it's really, it's amazing. And I think, again, people say, doing Agile gets you about 20% of what Agile can do for you. Being Agile gives you factor 3.
Okay, amazing.
And not coming from me, it's again comes from Michael Salta, But I think just
on this, I'm very conscious that we're at a point now where we're really going to accelerate, I think, people's perspective of what's possible. I also think that we've got so many other topics to cover. We've got culture, which I'd like to really, cultural change as well. I guess we've touched on it indirectly. High performance teams, I think, is going to be fantastic. If it's okay with you, I'd love to schedule another session, Markus, sure. Because I think to rush this in a few minutes, I think we've got the opportunity to kind of have a deeper discussion on this, and then maybe loop back and feed into stakeholders we haven't really talked about yet, stakeholder management, cultural change, high performance teams, being Agile. I think we've got kind of enough topics there. Would you be okay doing a second session?
No, happy to do so, Jonathan. That's what I think would be really interesting for the audience to see, and it was a bit of a mixture between doing Agile, being Agile, but really giving them sort of now the real example, because I've experienced both. I've experienced doing Agile, and what happened all of a sudden, everyone says, the executives say it doesn't work, the teams, they say it doesn't work. It's a lose situation. This is, and then I think we turned it around. Not picture perfect, and I would like to share, and it's all about stakeholders, it's about ownership, and how did we do it? And not rocket science again, but just, yes, you can do it, and I think there's lots of companies actually, they do it. Sometimes it's even the big ones, it's like people who you would not even expect that they do it. So yes, certainly.
Thank you for listening to the Hokuso Conversation. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
If you did, please do share us with your friends and community. Take a look at our previous episodes and look out for our next ones. We look forward to you joining us on this unique exploratory journey.